right. Evie and I are back. My beard is not back for the time being. It'll return in the future. But today I'm going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. The review embargo just broke today, and I wrote my official scored review that I published earlier this morning at Embargo. I gave it an 8 out of 10, so if the number score is all you care about, there you go. But I think there's plenty to say about the game, a game which, to be honest, did not look very good. I do not think there was much buzz about Guardians of the Galaxy ahead of its launch. We got some pretty lengthy previews of it. I remember there was like a 20-minute preview of it in the Square Enix showcase. It's like most of the showcase, and then like just this week we got like the first 30 minutes of the game, and like this just didn't really generate a ton of buzz. I think people are skittish because of Avengers. Avengers was made by also under Square Enix. That was Crystal Dynamics, although Eidos Montreal helped. And Eidos Montreal is the one making Guardians of the Galaxy. So this sort of just seemed like another installment of the we're using MCU characters but not really type of thing that a lot of people criticize Avengers for, even though I will note Avengers did sell very well and it's still doing pretty good, recent controversies aside. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is way different than Avengers. It is pretty much the opposite game of Avengers in every possible way. It is just a story campaign. It is a very, very long story campaign, and there is no post-launch live service, loot grind, whatever content attached to this at all. I am told this is not like in response to Avengers, like they didn't change this from a different type of game because people criticize Avengers for all the live service stuff. Like this was always kind of meant to be the plan here, and I think a lot of people will find that this works a lot better based on kind of what they wanted from a Marvel game, and I think it is going to be better received on the whole than Avengers, although I think Avengers wins in at least one major category, which I'll get to. But this game is relentlessly linear, like to the point that I have almost never seen this in like a generation or two. We have, there's a lot of like single player games at this point, like single player story based games. That's like Sony's whole thing, is just a ton of single player story games. But either that is like open world, like Spider-Man or Horizon, or it is like quasi open world, like Uncharted or Last of Us. Like those are linear games, and yet there are still these kind of like large sections where you can explore, and there's a lot of downtime, and you can take your time in these sections, and like this is a game that goes way back. Like I'm reminded of maybe kind of the original God of War games, where not like the fixed camera angles and stuff, but like the linearity where like you would just be going through these specific levels, you hit an encounter, and then like the extent of the secrets is like maybe you find this one alternate path that leads you to a secret chest or something. This is pretty much exactly how Guardians of the Galaxy is structured. It is very, very, very linear, where you're just kind of, I don't want to say like a series of hallways because it's not that boring, but it is kind of like that, where you're just going hallway to hallway, puzzle section, combat encounter, hallway, and then like along the way you can maybe open another door and find a room with some extra materials, or one very non-Avengers thing, you just find a lot of costumes out in the wild. They are not sold in a microtransaction store, and a lot of the costumes are very good. There's a 5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse costume series where everyone looks very evil and like glowy, which is cool. But that's, a fun thing, is everybody loves when you can discover costumes in game. That's the whole Spider-Man thing everyone loved. The linearity of the game, this is kind of a main point I was making in my review, that the linearity of the game allows this really kind of advanced level of storytelling, where we've gone back to the past for the structure of the game, but because the game is so linear, the script is always able to move forward. And this is the most dialogue I think I have ever heard in a game, like maybe ever, honestly, like outside of, RPGs where you have like really long conversation trees where it's just like two people standing there, and, Mass Effect or Dragon Age or whatever, and you can have like a 40-minute conversation with someone just based on going through their dialogue menus. This I'm talking about, it's like dialogue with your team out in the world about what's happening, and there are there's pretty much not even like 30 seconds of silence in this entire game, and because the commentary is always about what's happening. Even if you do something like take a detour to go find some spare parts, you'll have like Rocket Raccoon being like, Peter, what are you doing? Like, why are you over there? Like, and you pretty much never hear dialogue repeat. There are no like canned lines except maybe in combat, but that's to be expected. But in terms of like as the actual story progresses, there are unique lines everywhere. There are unique animations, especially when you're back on your ship. It's not just like your team is just kind of standing around Mass Effect style, and you go and talk to this person in this room, this person in this room. Like they're moving around doing stuff, and like there's kind of like mini in-person cutscenes going on, and then you can like talk to them as they do this, and they kind of it feels very natural, is what I'll say. It feels like you're on the set of a TV show or something. Essentially, it is very flowy and not rigid, and only rarely does it kind of dip into like the two of you are standing at each other, talking at each other. This would not work, of course, if the dialogue sucked and the writing was annoying. I was very impressed on the whole with the writing here. I was a little worried about it and the humor and stuff from the initial preview that was like 90 minutes or so. The final game, because people ask, is probably anywhere, if you speed run it, I don't know, 10, 12 hours. But I took my time in the sense where I was like always trying to find secrets and stuff. I think I was about 17 hours, so I'm going to say like 15 to 20 hours for this game, unless you just die a bazillion times, which you probably won't because it's not that hard. And I didn't get sick of the dialogue. I think at least for the most part, they do a very good job with voice work and the voice acting here. I have never heard of anyone in this voice cast. I looked at the end credits and I saw who was playing each character, which has not been promoted ahead of time. I did not recognize any names on the list unless I missed something. And that is unusual because like I know a good amount of major video game voice actors at this point, but that doesn't. And a game like Avengers, pulled a lot of very A-list video game voice actors to be in that game. But this game, I'm sure they've had other parts, but I didn't recognize any of the names offhand personally. But I think for the most part, they did a very good job. The main three, because Groot is Groot, he's Groot. I mean, he's going to say, I am Groot, and he does some funny things sometimes. But it's Rocket, Drax, Gamora, and then Peter. Rocket and Drax, I think, are really good. Like, I think Rocket and Drax are pretty much on par where they are in the MCU in terms of being engaging, lively characters. I thought Drax, everybody loves Dave Bautista's Drax, but the Drax here is really good. Like, he does the whole, like, very literal, straight-faced humor thing. Like, it works here just as well as it does in Guardians of the Galaxy, if I'm being honest. I think I found Gamora maybe a little more interesting and engaging this time around. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but she's got more dimensions to her, I'd say, than being like ultra tough warrior person. Like you can kind of get into more nuanced conversations with her and talk about people like Nebula come up and Thanos, and like there's a lot to go into there. I did not like Peter Quill. I never liked Peter Quill. He did not grow on me over time, and considering he's about half the dialogue in the game, that's not ideal. They were trying to be not Chris Pratt with this, which is fine because I think some people are annoyed by Chris Pratt's Star-Lord anyway. And this is like this 80s rocker, blonde hair, slick back. He sounds like a surfer dude, which that's just like kind of how his voice sounds. Like that's the inflection I got, which is weird because I thought he was like some Midwestern corn dude. Like his voice doesn't really match, the way I pictured him. I just don't think his voice work and performance is on the same level as the other characters in the game. And he didn't really grow on me over time. Like, he's okay. He's passable. And, like, Peter Quill is supposed to be, like, kind of a doofus. Like, that's just his thing to a certain extent. But he is one aspect of the story that I didn't love. And that's not great considering he is the main character of the game. The rest of the story I don't really want to go into, but it is not really remotely related to anything we've seen in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. There are characters you will certainly recognize from Marvel lore, and that including some pretty big ones that have a pretty big part in the game, but the main story is you start out you're trying to capture a monster for Lady Hellbender, this like Cassandra-looking warrior woman who everyone teases Drax about having a crush on, which is kind of hilarious. because he kind of does. And that storyline branches into going to Nova Corps, the big kind of space police, and there are like Peter's ex-girlfriend is there, and there's a lot of drama that happens there. And then ultimately the big bad of this whole game, which is not a spoiler, it's common. It's like this church of, actually I don't remember the name of the church. It's like the church of something that is brainwashing people using some sort of power source that you have to discover, and the whole galaxy is indeed in trouble, and you have to save it as the Guardians of the Galaxy. It works. I think the story the pacing is not the best, and towards the end especially, I thought it maybe dragged a little bit, but people want their value out of their linear story games if they're going to be paying $60 for them, so that's why it's this long. I was less enthused about combat. Combat is okay. This is one area where I don't think it compares favorably to Avengers. I think among all the other problems with Avengers, I think combat in Avengers and the kits Crystal Dynamics created for each Avenger is really, really good. I think they're all fantastic. The game is a blast to play. This game is like passable to play. It has these like very self-contained combat sections where you kill everything and like Peter does a little pose and you get a little XP bar. So it's kind of like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta or something like that. But it's not nearly as good as that. The main hook of combat, it revolves around Peter kind of commanding all 4 members of your team to do various things. Like Peter has his blasters. Eventually you unlock all these different elemental powers for them, some of which are pretty good, but it always felt to me like your team is just way better than you in every single way and do way more damage and have way more utility than you ever do. So you're constantly just spamming your teammates' abilities like all over the place. And they're like one-shotting, two-shotting enemies where you're just like, it feels really awkward to kind of use your blasters in a lot of circumstances as opposed to just like, I'm just going to have Gamora cut that dude in half and like, that's it. The team combat makes good use of like environmental things. Like you can have Drax pick up a explosive barrel and throw it at someone. You can have a rocket hack a thing and it blows up an AoE thing. The teammates' powers are good. Like I still can't help but feel like I would have loved to have 5 Crystal Dynamics designed heroes that we could play ourselves. And combat is just like not quite there for me. And we have to compare it to a lot of superhero games. I don't think it measures up to Arkham. I don't think it measures up to Spider-Man. I don't think it measures up to Avengers. Like it's just not there. Like it is okay, and it is not like necessarily taking away from the game. It's just I don't think it's one of its best assets. One thing I really will say is terrible and is taking away from the game is the ridiculous huddle mechanic. So the huddle mechanic is essentially like you fill up your super bar and you hit L1 and R1 and you go into a huddle, which like is a cutscene in the middle of a combat encounter where all your teammates like run up to you and face you, and they just pick some random phrases about whether they're enjoying battle or not enjoying battle or whatever, and you have 2 dialogue options and you have to pick the one that like matches up with what they're saying, which is stupidly easy because it's very obvious. You pick the right one, your whole team gets a boost. You pick the wrong one, just you get a boost. And like it resets their cooldowns and plays a cool 80s song and everyone gets a power boost. So like the functionality of it is fine, but the way it breaks up combat is beyond obnoxious to the point where I would actively avoid trying to trigger that because I just didn't want to sit through the stupid cutscene. Like if this was just an interactive thing where you just hit it, the song played, you got your boosts, and you kept going, that would have been much better. This is feedback I gave them in the early tests, but obviously it was too late to change. This was just a big swing and miss for me. It really, combat is already not like the most fluid thing in the world, and this was a really bad aspect of it. Fortunately, it doesn't come up that often, and you can avoid it kind of, although sometimes they kept hitting it by accident because like one of the buttons is command your team and one of the buttons is elemental guns, and obviously you hit them at the same time sometimes, so I kept triggering it by accident. But that sucked. That was not a good idea. Fundamentally, a couple other questions I got about this is, does this have replay value? I'm going to say no. I don't think so, because once you get through the kind of 15 to 20 hour story, you will be maxed on everything. You should have all of your character ability. Each character has 4 abilities, including like a super ability that you unlock. And then you will probably have more than enough if you did any amount of exploring, you have more than enough resources to upgrade all your perks, most of which are not very useful in the first place. So there is a New Game Plus, but if you do a New Game Plus, I feel like the only thing you can really do is make different decisions, and yet this also does not seem to really be a game like Mass Effect where there are very clear like decision breakpoints to me. Like you could side with one teammate or another teammate, or you can like antagonize someone or try to persuade them or something, but like this doesn't, I have to go confirm this with like seeing other people's playthroughs and stuff, but this doesn't seem like a game that is going to have drastically different outcomes in the end here. Like, I don't think this is a spoiler to say like none of the Guardians of the Galaxy died by the end of the game in my playthrough. I very much doubt there is like an ending where like only Peter Quill survives and everyone else has died because of the decisions you made. It doesn't seem like Mass Effect to that extent, and it just doesn't strike me as a game that would be worth playing all the way through again just to make some opposite decisions to see like maybe a few alternate scenes. Like I could be wrong, but it really does not feel like that to me. So I'm going to say there is not really replay value here, even though there is a New Game Plus mode. But if you just love the game that much, go for it. But you're not really going to be unlocking anything new, I don't think, and you're just might have a mildly different story. But I think most of the major events of the game are set in stone, and you will not have too much of a different experience there. As for whether this is worth $60 or not, this is the eternal question. Like, if you are a really big Marvel fan, if you really miss kind of linear story-driven games, and you're not playing whatever else right now, like, yeah, pick it up. I'd say it's probably worth it. 20 out, 15, 20 hours, $3-4 an hour worth of entertainment if you want to do that calculation. Yeah. If you're, more casual about this, I could see waiting for a sale because this is going to be a one-time playthrough kind of thing. I do not know if this will make its way to Game Pass. Like, the assumption is everything will come to Game Pass someday. And yet, this is not a game that has any microtransactions, so you have to keep in mind that if it did come to Game Pass, it would not be making any money outside of the deal itself, unlike Avengers, where Avengers went to Game Pass eventually and PS Now, but it was, it still had a ton of cosmetics to sell, and now XP boosters. So I just don't, if it came to Game Pass, I feel like they want to get a lot of sales out of the way, so I'd be surprised if it came to Game Pass within this first year here. But in the end, I think this went a lot better than pretty much anyone was anticipating. I did not expect this. Like, this isn't like some amazing, game of the year contender probably for me, but it certainly is a lot better than it looked and better than the marketing suggested. You kind of have to be immersed in the game with the characters to really get a sense of that. And even with these long previews, it just, I can see why that didn't come across. So I don't think I'm alone in this. The general critical sense I'm seeing is that a lot of people were surprised that this was better than they figured it would be. Whether that equates to a purchase for you, I don't know, but I can only kind of give my opinion on this, and that's where I've landed. So I'm not playing it. I'm not going to do another playthrough again. I'm done with it, which is fine. I love playing a game and having it be done and walking away and playing another game. Like, not every single game I play needs to be live service, because Lord knows I cannot handle any more live service games when I'm simultaneously juggling 3 or 4. So this is a breath of fresh air to me because I am both interested in, the Marvel Universe and also not getting into another live service game at the moment. So those are my ultimate thoughts on it. And if you play it, let me know what you think. Launches tomorrow. Hopefully I didn't share anything I wasn't supposed to. I don't think I did. But that's all I got for now. I don't think I'll do another video on it, but I did want to do some form of kind of live video review today that will no doubt be way worse than the carefully edited thing that Skill Up did. So I got to watch his after this. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.